What's going on, junkies? It's Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey, and this is the Daily Wealth Junkies Show. Thanks for joining us today, and we've got an awesome show in store for you. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to, and rate and comment on the episodes so that we know how we're doing and how our guests are doing and how they can do anything better. And also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will to introduce our guest.
Thanks, Brandon. Today we have Brandy Henry on the show. So she has a company and empowers people to build community and do their own social media. So she works with people primarily that are newer to business or others that have been doing this a while, but they've stalled out and need to ramp up their social media. So really awesome interview we're about to have. Brandy, thanks for coming on the show. With that, can you just give the listeners a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. First, thanks, Will and Brandon, for having me. I really appreciate it. And your audience is one of my favorites because it's what my master's degree is
Awesome.
Helping people in their 20s.
So open your ears and start listening.
Yeah. Tune in.
So I was the kid who had the lemonade stand on both sides of the street so that no matter what direction someone was driving, they could stop and
I love that.
Get lemonade anywhere.
Running back and forth. And then I got older and I went after security. So I got a bachelor's degree in accounting, and I actually worked at Nike for a few years. And I'll let you ask friends that may have worked at Nike what the culture is like there. So I made it about 2 years before I realized that corporate.
I assume not good?
It's not good. It's not necessarily very good to be overhead in a big company.
Interesting.
It changes the dynamics. It changes the amount of support the department gets. It changes a lot of things. And I realized it just wasn't for me. And by then I was married, and my husband and I were going to grad school at night. So we decided, let's go to grad school full time and start over when we get back. So we went off to Clemson, where we both got master's degrees, and Clemson, probably most of your audience knows as the Tigers in South Carolina.
You know, I went to University of South Carolina for a few years.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason I'm sober today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So got a little bit of a rivalry there.
That's for sure.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. Those were fun years. We were just 100 yards or so from Death Valley.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was
cool.
It was fun. Yeah. And so came out of there with a master's in guidance and counseling for college age students, people in their 20s. And I loved it. I loved sitting down with students and helping them figure out what they wanted to do, where they were going, how to tell their parents they don't want to be a doctor, all of these things that were going on during those years.
Yeah, basically the thing that every college age kid goes through.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right. And I loved it. And then as time went on, we had a family, and I stayed home and homeschooled my kiddos until about middle school. And that was because they had some special needs. And along the way, I was still working part-time here and there, but not really building anything that was just for me. So about a year and a half ago, as they were older and they didn't need to have me as much, I decided I wanted something that was mine and that I could build, that I could put all the hours in I wanted to, I could depend on myself. And I decided to build a business around helping other people do social media because I was more or less doing that already. Decided, well, it'd be nice to get paid for it. And my husband and I put in.
What do you mean you were doing it? Sorry to cut you off. What do you mean you were doing it already?
So I was on Instagram a lot, and I would do lives, and I would help people understand how to do lives effectively, help answer questions about changes to Instagram. I just really enjoyed the platform. Mm-hmm. I still do. It's my favorite platform. It's not the only one that I'm on or that I use or appreciate, but I do really appreciate Instagram. I've loved it for many years.
Very cool.
So what I found out was a lot of people were pretty effective on Facebook, but they were kind of afraid of Instagram, or they just weren't using it. And I decided, well, let's start helping people, even, but my age and slightly older generally are my clients, but I have several millennials that I help who are just nervous, really. They might be a little reserved. It could be anything.
Yeah, because
And
if you're going live, you're kind of putting yourself out there.
exactly.
Nobody wants to really record unless it's Snapchat when they're sending it
Right.
to their friends. But no, nobody wants to sit there and record and have 500 people watching a video of them
Right.
and stuff. So I
Right.
totally
I'm
understand.
one of those people. I've
Yeah,
never done it.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like anything else. It's the first few times are nervous, and then if you can push past those,
hmm
you're on your way. And just like you guys did with recording podcast, I'm sure the first
yeah.
5, 6, 7 were a
Some
little
20,
tough.
30,
stutters and some
40.
yeah, 20, 30, exactly. Right.
But
Yeah.
if you don't do those first, like as they say in writing, those first few, crappy first drafts, those first
Absolutely.
That's
few
right.
Very
bumpy
true.
ones, then you're not going to get to the smoother
That's
lives
Yeah.
or
right.
the smoother podcasts or the other better paragraphs or whatever you're working on. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And I get most of my business education through podcasts and Audible books. And I've done a few online courses, a few workshops, but I really have reined in the expenses and a lot of networking. And my business is profitable. I'm able to contribute to the household. And I think what I realized is I really like relying on my own time management. One of the things I didn't like about corporate life was like if the systems were down, I couldn't go run errands and then, take care
Right.
of my own stuff and then come back and get to work again. Everyone just had to sit there and then come in on Saturday. I
Yeah.
was like,
Oh wow.
at that age, I didn't connect the fact that maybe I'm not employable. I just didn't. I that made
Most
no.
entrepreneurs
Right.
come to that
Yeah,
realization at some point.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So that's been my journey. It's been a lot of fun. It definitely has had its low points getting going. Um, the book, The Dip. Oh, why am I drawing a blank on the very famous author Seth Godin? That book really helped me through those low months of like where you're like, do I keep going or not? And that was a super helpful book. And it's a short one. I listened on Audible. Um, yeah, so The Dip was a great one, and I'm glad I stuck with it.
Very
Yeah.
well.
So tell us about, speaking on that, on the dip and the tough months and all that. So how did you get started? How did you
Mhm.
come up with the funding? Just give us kind of the
Yeah,
nitty gritty details on all of that.
yeah, absolutely. So I spent in the beginning about 1,500 getting a I learned how to do my own website. I learned how to do my own email and learning how to do all of these things. And what comes along with that are mistakes. And some people might call that wasted money, but really it's part of the journey. You're going to
Mhm.
spend some money that you wish you hadn't spent that way. And it's just part of the process, just like those bumpy early podcasts or any of that. Those first
Right.
few times you go to a networking event and you got to stick your hand out and start telling people about how you can help them.
Right.
It's the same thing. There was some money and in ways I spent it that wasn't ideal, but I learned quickly and I didn't do that again. And then what I did in the beginning was I did a lot of free workshops, and a lot
Okay.
of people from those workshops have become long-term clients. So I'm really glad I did that. And then they've told other people, and through networking and putting myself out there, it's been great. Did that answer your
No,
question?
it definitely did.
Okay.
What are some of the, but just to dig a little deeper, what are some of the
Mhm,
things that you, looking back, that you
mhm.
spent money on that you probably shouldn't have?
Yeah, I wish, although I enjoyed my time in a shared workspace, I really ought to, instead of doing that, I really just should have spent $3 at a coffee shop
Mm.
and, done that, and the flexibility of coming in and out of coffee shops depending on what the day is.
How much was the workspace, if you don't mind me asking?
It wasn't bad. It was about $25 a day.
Okay.
Okay.
That adds
But
up though.
it does.
Yeah.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
adds up because 2 days of that can be learning, what are the best Facebook ads for me to be running,
Right.
or, all of these things.
Right.
It's tough choices. And after I went through that 1,500, I refused to take on any debt. And I'm still running my business that way. But I've also sold off old toys. I've sold off unused
Nice.
exercise equipment. I've
Yep.
been selling all of that stuff and using that to supplement until recently when I don't need to be doing that anymore. But it was important to me not to have a credit card to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to think harder. Like, is this $10 really the best place to spend it?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that has really paid off. It forces you to really think and prioritize and believe in your choices instead of being more maybe haphazard if there's credit involved. That's just me. It could apply to other people.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes getting a credit line is smart, but
Hmm.
if you don't have any foreseeable future to pay off that debt, then
Right.
you know it's probably not smart. But like you said, you've got old toys and old equipment that you probably don't need or use,
Yep.
or
Yeah.
sell it
Cash it
off
in.
and
Yeah.
use that money. But I like what you said. It does force you to really prioritize,
Hmm.
your schedule and what you're doing with your time and your resources. And I'm sure it made
Absolutely.
you question, do I really want to do this too? Is that,
Oh, for sure. For
yeah.
sure. Especially during those low moments when, summer is naturally a quieter time in a lot of business.
Hmm.
Those months of August is, here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, August is like this precious, pure sun time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And people really don't want to be in coffee shops or networking as much.
Working in general.
Working in general,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Families are kind of in a vacation panic mode as kids are going to be going back to school soon. So a lot of people are busy with families, and that was a tough month to ride out. But I've learned in the future that month will be like those deep dive months, those really intense thinking through, really focused on whatever the project is at that time, and really not and prepare ahead of time for it
Hmm.
to be slow.
Yeah. Have the rainy day, the reserve fund
Hmm.
set up so that you know that that it's coming.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's smart. So what got you kind of out of that funk that you were in at one point where you're just kind of, I assume it's because you were just bleeding, you're probably just bleeding
Yeah.
money. Right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. And even if
what got
you're,
you out?
yeah, so Seth Godin's book, The Dip, I listened to, I think it took me about 2 hours to listen to. I love Audible. I love listening as a form of learning. I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it's certainly convenient.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He talks about how you kind of, you know, the enthusiasm, the adrenaline, all of that is now gone. And you're in this place of a kind of valley, and you've got to decide, if I keep going, will this work? And it's okay to say that maybe it won't, but look at it really objectively. Really think it through. Are you just realizing that this is really hard, which it should be? That's why people they they get paid off for pushing through the dip. Most people will quit at that point, is what he explains. Most people will get to that 6 month, 8 month point where where like all of that fun time is gone, and you're just kind of down and out. And that's where it's like, you either keep going and you will pull out if you can sustain it, if you have the resources you need, but don't just quit because it doesn't feel good right now.
Hmm.
And that's where success is really in many ways determined. And he talks you through all that, and it was so helpful. It's such a great mind shift.
That's really good because I think a lot of times I know I've started different ventures and even CEO Capital Partners. It's like when you're getting the LLC formed and drawing up the
Mhm.
operating agreement and designing the logo, it's like everything is fun
Yeah.
and you're creating this thing and you have this nostalgia.
Hmm.
And when that will eventually wear off,
It
and
does. Yeah.
and that's what you're saying is that it's normal to have that feeling go away,
Hmm.
and you just got to kind of look back and think it through and look at it objectively like you said,
Yeah.
and just remember why you started it, and if
Yep.
it's if it is going to be successful, keep going,
Right.
keep trucking ahead. And it
That's
sounds like
exactly
that's
right.
exactly what you did, right?
I did, and I saw I can sustain this. I didn't have thousands and thousands in debt. I wasn't asking my family to go without dinner in order
Right.
for me to keep pushing on. So I I thought it through, and I was like, yeah, I can sustain this. It's more of, you know gritting it out in some
Hmm.
ways. And keep
Yeah,
going.
it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable,
It is.
and
Yeah.
just
Yep.
doing it, and like you said, eventually it's going to become successful if it you
Yep.
can sustain it, and it'll be all worth it. And
Yep.
all big businesses and successful individuals go through that dip, and I don't think on social media it doesn't appear that way. Everybody, it appears that
Right.
everything is all successful and
Right.
looking great, but behind the scenes they're going through that dip at the moment, and
Yep.
they're just not showing it. So.
Yeah. So
Right.
what were some of the things that you started doing to grow your business and get
Mhm.
some wins under your belt?
Good, great question. So first, I doubled up on networking, and I joined what's considered a closed networking group, and that has helped a lot. I did a lot of research, and the other networking groups I was part of, I would show up and do my part, but other people didn't seem quite to know what to do. Like
Mhm.
they
Okay.
didn't quite know how to support other people, or how to give back, or how to refer back and forth. And what I realized is having a group that the rules are laid out. This is what you need to do. This is how you do those things. Other people needed that. And I really appreciated having a group that was structured. And that paid off
Okay.
really fast. And I'm glad I've done that. I still have a lot of business outside of that group from all the workshops and things I had done before. But this has also given me the opportunity to build even more. And that has been great. And now I'm starting to get clients through my podcast or through things,
Nice.
on social media. And that is really exciting.
So how did you find that first initial group, the closed group?
Somebody invited me to be a guest,
Hmm.
and I had no idea what it was. The first time I went, I was just like, oh no, I don't need to be told, I know what I
Right.
need to be doing. But that's over time later, I realized, oh, other people need to be told what to do when it comes to a networking group, when it comes to supporting each other
Hmm.
and not see each other as competition. And that I, I really keyed into. And once I understood that, I came back around several months later and did eventually join or invest in doing it. And I'm glad I did.
That's cool. I don't know about you, but I realized when I was uh, in the mortgage business,
Hmm.
there's networking is a big part of it, going to those happy hours and all that fun
Hmm.
stuff. And when I first got started, and I was brand new, I was nervous
Hmm.
because of that, but also I always felt like I had to talk about business, talk about this or that.
Hmm.
And once I realized that I just have to be myself and
Yeah.
talk to people about anything other than business,
Yeah.
that's when you have the most success. When people
Yeah.
start to like you,
That's right.
that's
That's
when
right.
they'll figure out a way. If they know, like, and
Yep.
trust you, they'll figure out a way to do business with you. So
Exactly. Exactly. And allowing people to get to know you and resonate with you and understand how you communicate, and all of that is so important.
yeah. So were you just taking people out to lunches and coffees and just growing connections
Yep.
and doing that whole organic thing?
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I wasn't taking people out for lunches, maybe coffee. My budget wasn't there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have enough
Bills
for.
weren't involved.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. No,
So,
that's getting face to face. That's the most important
Yes.
thing. You can't just meet someone at a networking thing and then expect them to follow up and give you
Right.
business or whatever. You gotta get face to face. You gotta get lunch. You gotta get
Yep.
coffee. Yeah,
Yep.
that's really good. That's awesome that you did that.
Well, thanks.
So, yeah.
and so you said you're starting to get clients from your podcast
Hmm.
and your social media. Talk to us a little bit about what kind of content are you putting out there to attract clients and things like that, whether
Right.
it be the podcast or social media.
Yeah. So my podcast, engaging on social media, it just gives a lot of structure and a lot of tips and a lot of things to think about. And what it also does is give people a different perspective or a different mindset when it comes to their social media approach. I really stress having a mission statement, like know why you're there, know why you're showing up. But the harder thing is, how do you apply it to yourself? It's just like when you're out with friends and everybody can help see what's going on for you, even though it's harder to see it yourself. It's harder oftentimes to pull apart your own challenges. The same thing applies. It's often helpful to have someone else to sit down with and just kind of dump all the ideas out and dump all this challenges and lay it all out and help them do that. And with the podcast and with social media, when I show up on lives or do short videos, they're getting examples of that. They're getting examples of what it would be like to work with me and how I communicate and how I care about what they're doing. And that's where it becomes really effective. And that's been the most helpful way.
So essentially you're just being yourself and showing them that, hey, this is me. This is what you're going to get if you
Yep.
join with me, and this is what I can do for you.
Exactly. And then if I'm not their cup of tea, they'll go to somebody else, which is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's a fun way to allow people to get to know you, get to trust you, get to know that you know your stuff or what they may need help on.
Right.
They might not need help on what I'm offering on social media, and they just might like being a friend, and that's fine too.
Yeah. So what is, you just mentioned something that I'm curious about, the mission statement. When I go on social media, what is an example of either a business that you've helped or somebody personally that you've helped identify their mission statement? And what is an example of a mission statement?
That's a great question. I'll backtrack just a little bit. So most of us kind of show up on social media and we just flounder around, or we're very reactive.
Post political stuff and pick fights.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Or get triggered.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All the millennials.
Right. And we need to think a lot about how you're coming across to people. And an example of this would be, I help a real estate agent. She's been great on Facebook, and we're helping her get going on Instagram because in our area, a lot of millennials are starting to look into their own homes and buy, and she wants to be their go-to person. And so with her, the mission statement is to be someone they know as fun, who knows her stuff, and is hardworking and is approachable. And we would definitely refine that into a much shorter sentence. So when she shows up on social media, she's thinking about how she comes across to potential clients. And she already is naturally very fun and very giving. So let's show those things. Let's also respond with enthusiasm for the people that you're interacting with, what's going on with them, and what milestones are they celebrating, and support them in those things. How do we also make sure that they know we know our stuff? And so showing up and doing short videos or stories where she's walking through a new listing and why a certain curb appeal works and why another might not. And these are all ways of showing up, giving information, giving value, but also being very conscious that people are there and watching. What are they seeing? Yeah. And how are you coming across? And can they trust you every time they see you in their feed to be this consistency? Or are you sometimes going to snap at them because of a comment? That means you might do that if I go to hire you, and when I'm in town, I don't want to experience that. Right. So how we show up and interact on social media is essentially an example of what it'll be like for that person to interact with you in real life or to work with you on a project.
So it's almost like a brand of sorts where, that realtor, for instance, is she's trying to brand herself as the happy, fun, sociable, all that stuff that you just mentioned. She's trying to have people think of her and think of those things.
Absolutely. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So that is her brand. And
that's a unique way to look at it with the, Right. So when I'm going on there, don't come across, I have this one, he's actually a realtor, and all he puts up is stuff about how the left is, they're all idiots. And don't get me wrong, I lean right. So I don't,
you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't, it's not that I don't mind. I just look at it, I'm like, dude, I don't know how you're in a in a spot where
Yeah.
you're dealing with the public and you're putting
Right.
all that stuff out there,
Exactly.
and that's who I know him as. I
Hmm.
know him as the idiot that's going out and spewing stuff about
Right.
how, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an idiot and stuff like that.
Right.
So
Exactly. So basically what he's doing is he's niching himself down to people who agree with him.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And maybe that is all he wants as
yeah,
clients,
maybe.
but real estate's pretty competitive. I would take the money from people I didn't necessarily
Yeah,
agree with.
like why
Right,
does
I
selling a
agree.
house have to do anything with politics? It doesn't. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he's going to push away people who feel
absolutely.
differently or who just don't like that kind of
Right.
intensity. It's going to
Gruff.
feel,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
exactly. That's cool.
Wow.
So
So,
yeah, Brandon, I'm sorry.
no, you mentioned Instagram is probably one of your favorite social
Yeah.
media platforms. Can you kind of elaborate why or
Hmm.
why it stands out to you more than Facebook or Snapchat or all the others?
Yeah. Instagram is really a positive, supportive platform. Telling a story visually is hard to do, and there's respect for that. It's not a place for debate. It's not really a place where people get hot-headed that much, or it won't work out for the person who does. And it's a it's just really, it's started off with photographers essentially showing each other their work and their perspective of the world, and they were really supportive of each other and they were learning from each other, and that has really continued. And there's author communities, portrait communities, there's all sorts of visual artists on Instagram, and I love it. I love that, capturing a story visually and having it really stand out.
That's a great point. Nobody's really going on there and starting fights or ranting about
No.
whatever they're upset about, whatever triggered them.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of, like you said, a lot of millennials are using it. I don't personally have it right now, but
Mhm.
I've it's been floating around in my head to get one because everybody is using it. It just seems like a good
Mhm.
medium to come across to people, to different people.
Right. And it gives you the chance to show who you are and what you're up to
Right.
in
All
a,
right, absolutely. That's what I was just about to say. I mean, it lets people into your life a little bit by,
yeah,
if you're on vacation, you're showing people where you're on vacation,
yeah,
and it lets people know, hey, this is a real person here. This
right,
is, they're doing their life and things like that. So
exactly.
That's cool. So what do you have some people, what do you tell your clients when they're starting an Instagram or refining their current Instagram? Give us some things that you tell them to do
Hmm.
and to put on there.
Absolutely. So one of the first things I look at with them is their profile. So your handle and then the name that you put for your account, those are searchable. So first thing I'm going to make sure is that their handle is the same as their website name, is the same as their Facebook page, is the same as their
Uh,
email, So we want to look at that whole digital presence. And then the next thing I'm going to look at is the name, their username is also what it is that they do. So that when somebody goes to search, Portland Airbnb, if you are in that category, I want you to pop up, because as Instagram becomes more and more of a searchable place a place people go to search for
mm-hmm.
information and content, you want to pop up. So it might be, the handle might be for, say, somebody with an Airbnb, maybe their handle is Barnyard Airbnb, and their name is Joe, comma, PDX Airbnb, or Washington
uh,
Airbnb. So all
that's
of those
good.
things, yeah, all those things are searchable, and you want to come up when somebody goes onto Instagram in your age group and start searching using Instagram.
Yeah,
Then they can go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you want them to be able to find you very
Mhm.
easily.
Right.
Exactly. And then they can see imagery of your Airbnb. They can go right into your account or your profile and look at all the pictures and what you're about and
And
decide if
book
they're,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, your hopefully the person's phone and email are on there if it's set up as what's called a professional account, which is just basically a business account. And
That's cool.
Yeah, that's where we start. That is absolutely where we start. Because if you're not going to pop up in a search,
Yeah,
That's right.
that's the first step. You need to pop up in the
Yeah.
search, and then work on what happens after that.
exactly,
So,
exactly. So from there, most people have so much great content on their phone already that they're
mhm.
discounting. There's, they can really let people get to know them. You teach them how to do a post that's a story arc where like the first image is the best image and then every other image supports that image, whether it's like a day at the pumpkin patch and then all the details with that. So they're swiping through and getting to know you and what you were up to. And we go from there. And sometimes people want to learn what are the buttons, why do I do stories, and what's the difference between telling a story, and then remind them how, the video time length for the feed versus IGTV. And it's
Yeah.
it just takes
Yeah.
a little bit of time to get all that lingo down.
To get it dialed in and get used to it.
Right. And I often remind people that no one button on Instagram is going to explode your phone. So just have
Uh,
fun.
Yeah.
Delete things if you're not happy with it, or back out of it and
yeah.
enjoy it.
Re-record it or
Yep.
whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good stuff. So one last thing, I remember you talking about it earlier, and I wanted to touch on it. You said when you first got started that you did those free seminars.
Yes.
So can you? I think that you gave, not expecting anything in return, and it sounds like it all came back to you.
Mhm.
Can you explain that? I think that's a
Mhm.
awesome lesson right there.
Yeah, I agree. And I learned that from others who have gone before me, that to give first is to let people get to know what it'll be like to work with you.
Mm,
So when you show up and you do free workshops, or you're going live and you're giving free information, or you're doing a podcast and providing great content, you're not discounting your ability to earn money, because the challenge in any business for somebody is how do they apply that to their business. And that's where your expertise and you're sitting down with them one to one really is going to be where the income is earned. But the big picture of being able to provide content and tips, there's always so much more that people are going to want to know. So yes,
yeah.
so showing up, giving those tips, putting the little bits out on social media, or doing, a bigger free workshop where you've got this stage essentially to tell your story and where you've come from, and to relate and empathize with the challenges people are feeling, is really where it's at
Mm,
for building up your business.
that's so good. Yeah, that's it's like that whole you give without expecting anything in return, and you're
Right.
passionate, and you truly are giving. You want whoever you're giving to succeed,
Yep.
then it's going to come back in spades. I mean,
Yeah,
as it
exactly.
sounds like it has for you.
It is. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
been really exciting. Yeah. Thank
that's
you.
cool. Yep, absolutely.
So Brandy,
Yep.
where do you want yourself in your business going in the future, and
Mhm.
kind of what are your goals?
Yeah. So I'm going to go the digital course route, where I break down really simply elements of social media, like, 8 weeks on Instagram feed versus stories,
Hmm.
with homework each week, really going into helpful digital courses that are shorter and quicker. And that's what I'll be doing next year. And
Nice.
hopefully, yeah, so building that out. If I got 8 to 10 people with the first course, I would be dancing all over this
Yeah,
office, right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's where I'm headed, and that's a lot of what I'm learning about. So I have kind
that's
of
so cool.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
So I still love working one to one with people, but over time, it's um, it's not where I want to go financially, because it requires driving and
Right.
spending
yeah. You
time
got
with
to
your staff.
scale. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're a business, so
So let me ask, there's updates almost every day for a lot of the social media stuff. So
Mm,
how do you keep up? If let's say you build a course for something, and in 6 months
right.
the platform's completely different. Have you figured out how
Exactly.
you're going to
right.
keep up with that?
Yeah, I'll be editing those courses.
Okay.
Got
Yeah,
it.
that makes
Sure.
sense. So, but yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
swear Instagram, one day it's something, and then the next day
Yeah.
you're like, this looks completely different. Or
That's
Facebook, you're
Yeah.
like,
crazy.
I don't even know where anything is. So it's,
Right.
but
I get it.
And that's how they stay relevant. You know, they got to keep up with the game and
yeah.
so, but that's all. Yeah. I think the courses thing I think that's important to provide some sort of educational value.
For sure.
Right. And then support people through that.
Yep. Absolutely.
Very cool.
Well, Brandy, we're going to jump into our Moments of Truth segment here. It's the same 7 questions we ask all our guests, and we're going to just start with the first one here. Who is your success role model?
Amy Porterfield. She has a podcast, and she is many steps ahead of me in the digital course building world and business building world. And she is very generous with her content and what she allows you to learn from her. And that's my number one go-to for learning. I have several podcasts and people from whom I learn, but that's number one.
Very cool.
And you mentioned earlier that all of your learning has been from podcasts and books, essentially, right?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And affordable.
We're in the information age. I mean, there's no excuse. That's why I always say, there's no excuse to not be able to learn something or figure something out. You know, a few Google clicks, a few YouTube searches.
If I ever need to learn how to do something, the first thing is to YouTube and try to watch a video on it. So
think about that. 30 years, not even 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, that really wasn't around.
It wasn't.
So it's pretty cool.
So if somebody's thinking of trying to get out of a position or a job they're not liking, I mean, they can learn so much just driving into work or in their commutes.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. What's your biggest success?
I'll have, this one was a good one to think about, but I'll say, and I don't mean this cynically, but I've 23 years of marriage.
Me and Brandon, we're not, we're not. Yeah, not there yet. So.
Yeah. That's all right. We got
one
married
day
young, and I don't regret that at all. But I've gotten to where I'd rather go celebrate someone's 10-year anniversary than their wedding.
Yeah, that's funny.
it takes effort.
I mean, it's easy to get married. It's not easy to make it to 21 years.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
What does a typical day for you look like?
Typical day for me, I like to get up early. I'm an early riser, so I get up about 5 and have coffee in the quiet and get going and start my day. And a lot of my afternoon is filled, not every day, but there's some carpooling going on with the kids and their friends, and I like being part of that. But that means starting my day earlier because it takes a few hours out of that. And so I get going, I catch up on things, and often I'm out of the house by 6:30 or 7. Not every day, but often. The kids are old enough to get themselves ready and out the door. And I made sure of that.
Yeah. You don't want to be 15 and telling them what to wear, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I just keep going. Even on the weekends, I have my laptop open, and in between family things or kids, friends coming over, I can go a little deeper on things and pay attention. And I love working on the business.
That's awesome. I love it.
Oh, thanks.
I love it. What is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is that you've got to have the crappy first draft. They use a more explicit word, but it really applies to anything. It applies, we were talking earlier about a podcast or a book or those first times you go to a networking event. If you don't get through doing it poorly and awkwardly, you can't get to where you feel more smooth. And everybody ahead of you, who looks shiny and smooth, they went through all that awkward, bumpy. They didn't come out shiny the way we see them now.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure if you go back and listen to our first few episodes, they're probably much
we're like,
worse than what we're doing.
Hello, we're the wealth junkie.
I get it.
I mean, it makes complete sense. And until you do it several times, you're not going to be comfortable with doing it. So
exactly.
I mean, think about like David Letterman. I mean, there was a time where he never hosted there was a time where he had literally never done that once, and I'm sure his first few, if there's even footage of them hosting his guests, I'm sure it's really weird. Or Howard Stern, I'm sure. When he first got on air, he talks and he's just got that perfect radio voice.
He does.
But starting out, I'm sure that he didn't.
Right.
Yep.
It's not something that
Right.
you're born with. So
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, that's a good one.
What are some of your hobbies?
I love audio, so I love listening to books. I also really enjoy thrift store shopping. If you're ever in the Portland, Oregon area, we have the best thrift stores here. You can dress
Wow.
to the nines very
Really?
affordably. Yeah, I don't know why it's the way it is here, but I mean it's fun, but it's a little extra work.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy doing
Does
that.
Macklemore live there? Doesn't he have that thrift store song? I don't know why I thought that.
That's funny. That's really
Anyways,
funny.
that's cool. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
What's the best business book that you've read?
I would have to say The Dip to get me through
Okay.
the dip, because it kept me from thinking that maybe it wasn't going to work to realizing that it was a dip.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds like a great book that really everybody should read, because as we were saying, I think everybody goes through it. So
Yeah,
For sure.
no doubt.
For sure.
last question here, if there's one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what do you think it would be?
Go for it. Don't have regret by not going for it. If you're squeezing in the time, an hour in the morning before work or time on the weekends, you're going to actually be rather effective with that time, because even if you feel like you don't have much, you're going to use what you have really well. And
Right.
yeah, so you're not going to flounder around or spend a long day kind of dabbling. If you've got that hour and you're passionate, you're going to spend that hour really effectively. So go for it, and don't
That's
look
great
back
advice.
and wish, and don't look back that you wish you hadn't tried or hadn't
Mhm.
gone for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. So, Brandy, how can our listeners get in contact with you? What's your podcast name? Where can they get you on social media and all that?
Well, thanks. My podcast is on all the platforms. It's engaging with social media with Brandy Henry, engaging on social media with Brandy Henry. My Instagram is Brandy W. Henry, and Facebook is also Brandy W. Henry.
Nice. You got them to match. I like it.
Yeah, see,
You've got to do
Practicing
that.
what you preach.
That's right.
So it's easy to find you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Brandy, we appreciate you being on the show today. I had a great time talking to you, and hopefully, listeners got some value out of it.
I hope
And,
so.
and for our listeners, go follow Brandy if you need help, optimizing your social media to have a better presence and explode your business. Contact her, and also don't forget, subscribe to our show. And rate and comment so Brandy knows how she did today, and I know she did great. And join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. Brandy, again, we appreciate you being on.
I really enjoyed my time. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. See everyone tomorrow.
Bye-bye.